Rhyperior is a really interesting Pokemon because it is so min-maxed. It's got amazing attack stat, it's got amazing physical bulk, but on the other hand, it's got very poor special bulk that makes it even struggle switching into Zapdos. Despite all that, Rhyperior has a pretty relevant niche in the metagame as being one of the premier attackers that also is able to check Zapdos and Cinderace defensively, so it's got that offensive defensive utility. And here, as usual, we will look at three sets for Rhyperior. I actually struggled to figure out how I should divide up the sets because Rhyperior's options are all pretty similar. The sets blend into each other pretty well. So the first I thought would be the Swords Dance set. Rhyperior often runs weakness policy to make it way better at Dynamaxing. But at the same time, Custard Berry is a pretty good item on Rhyperior as well, and that allows Rhyperior to kind of take advantage of its weaknesses, take a lot of damage, get into custom range, even without like anything like Endure or Focus Sash, as which usually accompanies Custard Berry, and take advantage of that. If you're using custom, you might be better off doing a few defensive calcs and make sure that you survive some relevant super effective hits. Second is its Assault Vest set, which capitalizes on Rhyperior's defensive typing. Even though it has a pretty weak special defense stat, it is able to sponge Zapdos decently well. And unlike other Zapdos checks slash counters, something like Chansey or Porygon 2, it can't be volt switched on, first of all. And second, it's a real offensive threat. So even with 4 attack EVs, with Adamant Nature, is still going to pump up its meaty attack stat. And that means that you're going to be able to take actually the Zapdos Airstreams, even Life Orb ones, and switch into that and Dynamax and kind of check it that way. Fire Punch and Ice Punch standard coverage moves as seen on the first set, but the fighting coverage is listed there because unlike Swords Dance or Weakness Policy Rhyperior, AV means that Rhyperior has no way to boost its attack stat naturally, so that the Max Knuckle gives him that option, which can be pretty nice. And third, I guess, is the Stealth Rock sets. Even with the Stealth Rock, it can run a set that is pretty similar to the first one, except with the Sword Stance swapped out for Stealth Rock. Stealth Rock is pretty nice support. It lets you break through Focus Sash and Sturdy and things like that. And on top of that, Rhyperior still it gives you the ability to max guard, which is pretty relevant on the weakness policy set. Uh, but if you are using Focus Sash Rhyperior, for example, you are really focusing on its ability to set stealth rocks and support the team that way. And on those type of sets, Focus Sash is mainly used to take advantage of Rhyperior's weaknesses and use Counter and Metal Burst. Those moves are going to hit your opponent really hard when Rhyperior gets brought down to Sash. And that means that Rhyperior can still set up rocks as they switch into Vish or Rillaboom or something like that and trade 1 for 1, which could be really nice. So this is my Rhyperior team that I built the other day. And the second one is, I think I showcased this team earlier. It has the Focus Sash Rhyperior set with Metal Burst. So let's get into the games. So my first opponent has a very standard team actually. Got the Toxapex and the Porygon 2, which is very threatening defensively. But fortunately for me, I have a lot of wall breakers. Rillaboom, Banded Rillaboom, uh, they struggle to switch into that. On top of that, Rhyperior has the sword ability to set up sword stances, also pretty good. And it's also a really good defensive solution as well. Not a solution, I'd say, but it's a way to check the opposing Zapdos and the Cinderace as well. So yeah, let's get into the game. I'm going to lead with the Banded Rillaboom, which is going to lead pretty well against everything that isn't Cinderace or Zapdos, and I am able to switch into both. Not comfortably, especially against Zapdos, but pretty well. But fortunately for me, I don't have to deal with any of that. I'm just gonna go for a very quick and easy Wood Hammer. Uh, the thing is, even Cinderace or Zapdos don't really like switching into Wood Hammer, and on top of that, Zapdos can't roost on it without risking a 2-hit KO, of course, because it would lose its grass resistance. And in this case of Cinderace, it's gonna do like way over half. It does way too much for it to be comfortable. And on top of that, I have a Pex in the back, so I mean that is going to go pretty poorly for him. And he gets the Toxic off, which is the correct play. It's the main way he has of making immediate progress against this Rillaboom. And if he has Baneful Bunker, as a lot of Toxapex do these days, and he will be able to click that pretty easily and get some free chip damage. I'm gonna take a bit more Toxic damage this turn, and on top of that, on the next turn, I'm gonna take even more damage. And if he switches out, I'll take also a bunch of recoil on top of that. That could make Toxapex pretty difficult to deal with. But fortunately for me, I also have a Rhyperior in the back with the ground move, super effective against Toxapex, so I'm very well covered against it. And I'm glad that I'm able to make this progress on the Toxapex, and I'm able to put relevant damage on something else other than Toxapex. If he were to switch out, if he has to stay in and sack it, then that actually isn't that bad as well, because that means that I'll be able to get rid of the Toxapex for good. He doesn't feel comfortable switching into anything as expected. That might mean that he might not have the Zapdos, or he might still have it, but he realizes that he wants to Dynamax it at full health, which is fair. Either way, I would either be able to sack the Rillaboom, or let's see how important useful Rillaboom will be at the end of this. He brings in Cinderace, so that means that yeah, he did well not to directly switch into Cinderace against Rillaboom. That would have done way too much damage with the Wood Hammer. And I will just go into my Toxapex. And in order for his Cinderace to break through my Pex, that will mean that he will have to go ahead and use some either Zen Headbutt, or he has to Dynamax and spend multiple turns of his Dynamax to get anything done against me. So either way is I'm going to be making a lot of progress with this Toxapex. He chooses to Dynamax and goes for the Max Knuckle. So this is actually a pretty good play for him, because that means that I am going to struggle to wall him. Because if he were to have gone for Max Airstream or anything like that, then I could have just recover stalled pretty handily. But after the Max Knuckle, on top of the Life Orb, yeah, that Airstream is going to be doing a lot more than what I can recover off. So that means that he can actually 2-hit KO me. I go for the Toxic here, in case he chooses to preserve his Cinderace for some reason. But in hindsight, I think this was a slight misplay. I should have just gone for the Haze, because the damage on Cinderace isn't really too relevant actually. So that the Haze would have let me take less damage with the Rhyperior in the back. So yeah, he goes for the Max Airstream. It turns out he does not have Zen Headbutt. Not that I don't think that would have mattered too much, but yeah, that does way too much for me to recover or haze and stall out and beat 1v1. Think because he made the good play of knuckling on my Toxapex switch. So yeah, this is the thing with Dynamax Cinderace. Even with a set that doesn't really do well against Toxapex, which is one of the tankiest thing around physically, it can actually beat it 1v1 if he makes the right read and I'm forced to switch in like this. Actually, I am thinking if I want to preserve my Toxapex, because even though my Pex is low, I can regenerate out, and once he is done Dynamaxing, he will be forced to go for the bounce instead of Airstream, uh, and that means that I'd be able to haze, recover, and all of that. But I think my Rillaboom, my half health Rillaboom, is going to be a lot more relevant at this juncture than whatever my Toxapex can do, because I think it's done its job by kind of sponging the Cinderace Dynamax, forcing all 3 turns out of him, and getting some chip damage on top of that as well. So I am going to bring out my Rhyperior, as I said, and I'm just going to go for the max Rockfall. I don't want to waste any turns of Dynamax, and even if he goes for the high jump kick or Iron Head, which would do super effective damage and uh, make it resist max Rockfall, the weakness policy activation would mean that they would die anyways, especially after the poison damage and potentially also the sandstorm damage. So I'm not concerned about any of that. And Rockfall means that he doesn't have the potential to kind of like switch around to Zapdos or go for the bounce or make any silly plays like that. So that's why I go for the Rockfall. And I think it covers my all my cases the best in this scenario. And with the full health on my Rhyperior, even a +1 life or high jump kick is not going to be doing too much. So yeah, I would have died if I didn't Dynamax, because I didn't haze his attack boost. But because I still have my Dynamax and he doesn't, I think this is still pretty fine, as I am left with a +2 Rhyperior at a very high health. And also, one thing notable about Rhyperior is that both of its stab moves boost its special attack. So once it starts getting going, then it becomes really hard to KO even with special attacks. And he brings in Lapras, and this is exactly why I thought Rillaboom might be worth saving more than keeping the Toxapex around. And it turns out my Rhyperior is even faster than the opposing Lapras, which seems to be uninvested. So I'm going to be able to take that out for a KO, and that's going to be game. Good game to my opponent. My second game is going to be against a pretty interesting team with a Magneton instead of Magnezone. So Magneton's niche over Magnezone is that it's a bit bulkier with a Violet, first of all, and second, it's got higher speed tier, base 70 as opposed to base 60, I believe, and that means that it's better at using some like Choice Scarf. It's also better at, it could be better at using some niche sets like Screens, something that would much rather prefer Magnezone to kind of set up the screen faster and then get out using Steel Beam or things like that. So I am going to be bringing my Rhyperior, which is going to do well against the 2 electric types, the Moltres and the Cinderace. I think Rillaboom is pretty necessary for me to actually revenge kill some of the threats, including the Finny. Zapdos using the Dynamax seems pretty good here as well. So those are the 3 that I'm gonna go with this game. So yeah, I guess pretty interesting team by our opponent. I'm definitely curious if he's gonna bring out the Magneton, and he actually leads with it. So this makes me suspect something's up with this. It could be a screen set. Uh, there's a lot of directions that this Magneton could take itself into. It could also just be like pretty simple, straightforward, like 3 or 4 attacks type of set. So here I'm gonna Dynamax and go for the Max Quake here, but in hindsight, like as I go for this, I am kind of regretting it. The reason why I go for Max Dynamax is because a Steel Beam is going to just straight up KO Rhyperior, or at least come close to it, depending on how invested this Magneton is. But he seems to go for the Reflect, so this might have been a bit of a misplay. Let's see if he has the Sturdy. I mean, of course he has the Sturdy. And let's see what he does with the second turn. Does he go for a Steel Beam? Does he go for a Light Screen? If he goes for the Light Screen, I would guess that he has the Light Clay and is going to go for a pretty long 8-turn reflect screens and all that. But it turns out he has Custard Berry Endure. Very interesting set. And I guess it's still taking advantage of the fast speed tier from Magneton. But here I could have, I guess in hindsight, I could have gone for the Max Hailstorm. I didn't want to reveal Hailstorm, but it does end up costing me my final turn of Dynamax. So in hindsight, those 2-3 turns didn't play out so great. And I'm gonna have to suffer the consequences for that. I'm gonna be able to take Steel Beam if he goes for it, but he might not even go for it because, I mean, of course, the weakness policy potential is pretty obvious. So let's see if he's willing to take the damage, or if he wants to kind of set up somewhere else. So yeah, he goes for the Steel Beam. And even though that did less than half, that is because I was able to get the Max Quake and the Sandstorm up. So without all those effects, which basically more than doubles my Rhyperior's special defense stat, I would have been taken out pretty easily. So I'm glad that I went for the Dynamax here. And I am going to have to contend with the Reflect. So even though I am at +2 with my Rhyperior, the Reflect is gonna essentially cancel that out. And he goes for the Max Knuckle, which definitely I don't think that's a good play, because I think he's underestimating Rhyperior's bulk here. Because High Jump Kick would have definitely done a lot more than Max Knuckle, would have KO'd for sure, but I get it, he doesn't want to miss High Jump Kick and lose the game that way. And it is a pretty close roll, but fortunately for me, I get that roll in my favor. Even with the Life Orb, that barely does half, less than half, and my Rhyperior is gonna take a huge chunk out of his Cinderace. And what this allows me to do actually is put it in Grassy Glide range for the Rillaboom. So I know this calc off the top of my head, which is the fact that if the Cinderace without Dynamax gets turned into a type like Fighting that doesn't resist Grass, Rillaboom is going to be able to just one-hit KO it with Grassy Glide. So because my Earthquake got him down to half HP while Dynamaxed, that means that Rillaboom, that is essentially equivalent to a full HP without Dynamaxing. So that means that Rillaboom, if I can bring it out, then it's gonna KO with Grassy Glide. And on top of that, if he tries to reset his typing by switching out, then he'll be at half health because Dynamax wouldn't be in effect anymore. And that means that Rillaboom is gonna uh, KO Cinderace no matter what. So yeah, this is able to, now with his Cinderace out of the way, I'm not sure what exactly he can use to KO this Rillaboom. The only thing that he has remaining that actually resists grass is Moltres, and if he has that, Grass is still going to be doing a ton, and Zapdos Thunderbolt can easily finish it off. So this seems to be pretty much a clean lock here, as my Rillaboom is going to win against my opponent who brought two Grass Resists, and his final Pokemon is Finny. Understandable, because he probably thought that he wasn't going to have any trouble with the Rillaboom. So, and that, I think that makes sense. But Rillaboom was able to kind of come in after its checks got weakened, and now it's gonna win against Finny. I'm actually gonna switch out and try to set my grassy terrain again, because I think the only way I can lose this one is if he is like some kind of a Specs Finny, goes for the Ice Beam and crits my Rillaboom. And because I am not Life Orb on Zapdos, I'm Life Orb on Mimikyu. I could possibly also get a crit or froze on the Zapdos if I miss out on the KO. And those sequence, while very unlikely, I think that was my only way of actually losing this game. So that's why I kind of go into Zapdos and try to play it safe. So yeah, he does lock himself into Ice Beam, which makes sense. But that's not going to be enough against the Rillaboom. Even though he is able to take out the Zapdos, which is supposed to be a good type matchup for it. Yeah, but it's not going to be enough to take out both the Rillaboom and the Zapdos. And I'm going to go for the Grassy Glide, and there's nothing he can do. It's got the priority back with the grassy terrain. And now he won't even get a chance to freeze me, crit me, or any of that stuff. And he will forfeit. And yeah, Rillaboom, I guess, is the star of that game, though even though Rhyperior did pretty well there. And here we are going to be facing off against another pretty standard Zapdos, Urshifu, Dracovish team. He also has the Magnezone, so he's got a pretty similar structure to the types of teams that I was talking about previously on my Magnezone episode. So one thing I want to do is definitely bring the Rhyperior. I want to be able to remove potential sturdy on the Magnezone. I don't want to get caught by that. And on top of that, Urshifu also a common Stealth Rock user, so I don't want to lose to that either. And it's also able to check Zapdos in a pinch. Even I might not end up being able to check it fully because I probably won't be Dynamaxing Rhyperior with this set. The Focus Sash set definitely a lot worse at Dynamaxing here. But I do have my Mimikyu, which is going to be a pretty good answer to Zapdos if he Dynamaxes early, before me, which if he is to break through Rhyperior, that's probably what's going to happen. So let's see if he decides to Dynamax his Zapdos first or not, and try to play around like once he reveals that how he's gonna try to use his Zapdos this game. So my opponent brings in Zapdos turn 1, so I don't think he's gonna Dynamax immediately turn 1 because I do have the Rhyperior. He doesn't necessarily know what Rhyperior set that I'm using. So I am just gonna go for a easy Vicious Rend here. And let's kind of see scout out what my opponent is trying to do here. And he goes into the Dracovish, so that is a nice play. Even though it is a quad resist, that still does a solid chunk. But now, what's he gonna do now? So I'm gonna go out into the Mimikyu in order to kind of switch into the Outrage. And if he goes into for the water move, which is also a possibility, then I was gonna go right back into my own Dracovish, kind of mimic him that way. But he brings out the Zapdos against the Mimikyu, so that is a very solid play. He definitely probably expected the Toxapex to come out, which is definitely not a bad predict to go for. And even though I had the Mimikyu and not the Toxapex, this is still a pretty decent position for him. And here he goes for the Volt Switch, and I catch him with the Rhyperior. So this is a pretty solid turn for me to just go for the Stealth Rock here. As I said, if I get the Stealth Rock as he switches into Dracovish, that means that I can Metal Burst and trade 1v1. That's not a bad thing at all. But on top of that, if he tries to burst through my Rhyperior, which would be a pretty risky play, especially like not even Dynamaxing. That is very risky because I could have just taken them out with a rock move, but he's gonna land. He's even gonna confuse, but fortunately I don't hit myself in confusion. I'm able to get the Stealth Rock up, which is going to hamper Zapdos' ability to switch in and out in the long term. And because of its ability to, because of Stealth Rock taking a lot of damage on the Zapdos, he might actually just Dynamax here to ensure the KO, which would totally make sense here. So, but if he doesn't, that would be understandable as well. And that's why I took kind of go for the Rock Blast. If he stays in and gets the KO, then so be it. If he doesn't, I still get some relevant neutral damage with the Rock move. Rock type, a pretty good offensive type in terms of just kind of hitting everything neutrally. I guess its only downside as it's an attacking type is how it doesn't really get accurate moves. But as long as I'm hitting them, getting a lot of hits with Rock Blast, I should be able to punish basically everything. So yeah, Rhyperior goes down as he goes for the Max Airstream to ensure that he does not miss. And that means that I'm able to bring out Mimikyu and use my Mimikyu to check the Zapdos. Because he already used one turn of his Dynamax. He's going to be using his second in order to just break through my disguise. And I can max guard on the final turn. And he would have basically used up his Dynamax just so that he can get land the 70% accurate Hurricane on the Rhyperior. So in my books, that's a great trade for me. Even though my Rhyperior went down, my Mimikyu is gonna take quite a bit of damage. All that is, I think, a fine trade as Mimikyu goes for the Sword Stance. And unfortunately, a +2 sneak isn't fully in range to KO the opposing Dracovish, but it's enough to put him down into Fish's Rend range. Then we can see what his final Pokemon is. And in fact, it seems to be a pretty favorable matchup for my Dracovish, I think, at the end, because I am able to break through both Urshifu and the Magnezone because of the Stealth Rock support from the Rhyperior. And what that means is, unless he has Aegislash with King's Shield, I should be able to win this game with the Dracovish in the back. Of course, if he has Aegislash, he probably wouldn't bring it here. He will probably bring it after he brings out the Dracovish first and gets a kill on this Mimikyu. Or I guess I still have the option to switch out with my Mimikyu and go into my own Dracovish. So, but I think because I don't want to lock myself into Outrage either. So like even if I play around the Aegislash, locking myself into Outrage isn't gonna be it. Isn't gonna be doing it for me. So I want to Max Guard and Shadow Sneak and try to swoop Dracovish. And if he has Aegislash, then I will just take the loss here. Um, so in order to do that, I'm going to use my final turn of Dynamax to go for the Max Guard. That's why I kind of went for the Max Guard into Phantasm on the Zapdos, because I wanted to be able to kind of leave this option on the board to be able to Dynamax, use my final turn of Dynamax with the Max Guard. And I'm gonna go be able to fire off a meaty Shadow Sneak onto this Dracovish, but it's got pretty good defenses naturally, physical defense in particular, so that's gonna not KO. And on top of that, even with the Sun and the not double damage, Mimikyu is at such a low health that Vicious Rend is just gonna take it out. Um, if I were at a bit higher health, maybe that wouldn't have KO'd, but my Dracovish against the world, and let's see what happens. I will go for the Vicious Friend, of course. Logging into any other move would be pretty much suicide, and I will take a Vicious Friend first, actually, so that might have been a speed tie, because I am adamant on this team. So if he were Jolly, that he might have been better off just switching it out, but yeah, nice. I am able to take out the Dracovish. So the moment of truth, he brings out the Magazone. So unless he has Endure on the Custom Berry set, then my Dracovish should be able to take this out. If he has Endure, then the Thunderbolt is a roll, but he doesn't even have Endure, so that means that I'm going to be taking this game with the Dracovish. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. See you next time with more content. Bye.